Hello, Scott. Welcome to the EcoRevolution. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. Thanks for being here and joining us today. Thanks to all our attendees equally for being here. So we look forward to hearing your presentation on basically the future of mobility and how Chargepoint is playing a role there. We have participants from Boston, but also from Europe. So, feel free to share any insights that can help on both sides of the world there. So you can go anytime you're ready to go.
I can also share my screen, I assume, so I'll try and do that in just a second. It may look like I'm in Boston with the skyline behind me, but in fact, I'm actually calling you from California, where my first trip since 8 months in COVID back to the headquarters of Chargepoint, and we have meetings all day today. It turns out that our first meeting starts at 7 a.m. And so I'm going to get through this and be able to run off and go to those meetings. So I'm really pleased to be with everybody, really excited to be in this very, very exciting field of electromobility and share a little bit about what we're doing and what's happening in the world out there. Let me see if I can share my screen, see if I can get that going. Hold on.
Thank you, Scott. And Scott is VP of Sales for Chargepoint, right?
That's correct. I'm actually VP of our North American sales for fleets. And so it's a little bit of a complicated title. I've been with Chargepoint for almost 11 years now. When I started with the company, we had 400 charging stations installed across the United States and Canada. They were primarily United States, primarily in California. But I remember going to one in Lexington at an Element Hotel. It was what we call level 1 charging station, which basically would charge a Nissan Leaf in 16 hours. And I scratched my head at the time and said, why would anybody buy a charging station like this that would sit out in the front of their parking lot at this hotel to charge a Nissan Leaf in 16 hours? And by the way, a Nissan Leaf had been announced at that time, but had not actually been launched. Neither had the Volt. So it was an industry searching for cars. And that was my start. And I'll tell you just real quickly about my background in the company. My very first job with Chargepoint, I thought it was a dream job, was to literally give away 2,500 charging stations as part of President Obama's ARRA funding program. It was a small grant that the government had given us, but very important for us. And I was basically responsible for helping the city of Boston, city of New York, the city of Washington, D.C., the city of Orlando, Florida, and southern Michigan get their first EV charging stations. I'll show a couple of pictures from that time. Let me see if my slides.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. So this is very exciting. We do feel we're at the beginning of a new era, probably the golden age of green. It's very much needed with what's going on with the climate and everything else. So thank you for being here. You're ready to go whenever you are.
It's my pleasure. Do you see my slide, my first slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to just quickly talk about Chargepoint. Chargepoint was founded in 2007. So if you add it up, we're about 13 years old. But we announced several weeks ago that the company is going to be going public. Currently, it's trading as SBE, which is the name of the SPAC, the Special Purpose Acquisition Company that acquired us. But starting in the end of December, beginning of January, we will be charting on the New York Stock Exchange as CHPT. And that's a very exciting dream for me to be able to go through with a company that was so small when I started that's going public now. It's a real dream that I've always had. Everything we do in our company is EV charging infrastructure and services. But to be clear, Chargepoint virtually owns no charging infrastructure. We're not a company like Tesla that put our own network out and people are charging their vehicles at our stations. We sell charging stations, charging software, and charging services to customers, and they run their own charging network, but it's all part of the much larger Chargepoint network. We work with drivers to get them RFID cards and other capabilities to log into these stations. And we have now over 120,000 charging ports across North America and Europe. Very, very exciting to see it grow from 400 to 120,000. So what our job is actually facilitate little networks as small as one station, as big as what some people have over 2,000 or 3,000 stations. We have a very notable set of customers. 50% of our business is in workplace, and customers like Google, Apple, Facebook in the West Coast have dominated with large installations of our charging stations. But I can tell you also here in Boston, which is very true to my heart, we have a lot of companies that have deployed charging stations in their parking lots. We have parking companies, we have universities, we have restaurants, we have hotels trying to deploy this very large charging network. The company is based in Silicon Valley. We have over 750 employees, and 250 of them or more are engineering staff. What I'm doing now, after giving away those charging stations, about my progression within Chargepoint, I actually started the Eastern region and spent 6 years with Chargepoint running the Eastern region, which was basically everything east of the Rocky Mountains, built the organization, built the installed base of charging stations. And then they asked me to go over to Europe to start our European operations, which was really exciting. I've spent in my life 14 years living in France. My wife is French, my children and I are all dual nationals. And so it was great to go back and start building Chargepoint in Europe. We hired a general manager and a whole team over there. It was a very great experience. And I learned a lot about the European charging market, which is quite a bit different from the United States charging market. And I may make some comments on that later. But what I'm doing now is really interesting. Chargepoint's fastest growing business right now is electric fleets. And fleets would be defined as a delivery fleet, would be as a sales force, 5,000 vehicles for your sales force across the country. It would be a utility fleet. It would be a municipal fleet. This is by far the fastest growing market in the EV charging space. And in terms of deployment of electric vehicles, you're going to see an explosion of this going on. As a framework, today in the United States, the average, the number of vehicles sold is only 2% of all the vehicles sold are electric. And those numbers are projected to go way up. I'll show you that in a second. This is what it looks like in Massachusetts. We have, I'm going to move my thing over here. We have 2,247 public stations in Massachusetts with 3,807 ports. Some stations have 2 ports on them, and that's why you have a bigger number. We have 556 independent customers, and I'm showing where they all are. You can see a lot focused in Boston, but you have them on the Cape, you have them on the islands, and you have them out in Western Massachusetts as well. Some notable customers, our very first customer in Massachusetts, and it was not by default, it was the town of Lexington. I was able to stand on the Lexington Green on a day that was 102 degrees. On either side of me, I had a Minuteman, which was dressed in the full outfit. And for those of you who don't know, from Europe, Lexington is the start of the American Revolution. And it's where the first battle of the American Revolution happened. And I declared in my opening that this is the new American Revolution, the move from fossil fuels to electric. Many different places deployed our stations, including the city of Boston. If you go to Logan Airport, there are charging stations in every single terminal. National Grid, the utility, adopted them in full force. I think they got between Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New York over 150 charging stations that are open to the public. AstraZeneca is our biggest workplace customer in Boston or in the Boston area, but we have many, many workplace customers. And then of course, the universities, UMass and MIT. Just to get a sense for what they kind of look like. The left, this is a great picture I have. This is our CEO Pat Romano at my hometown charging station in Belmont, Massachusetts. Pat came and visited, and I spent about 7 years trying to convince the town that they needed public charging stations. Up until COVID, these stations got a whole lot of use. You can see Century Bank has it. On the right, it's MIT. Those were my kids when they were very little. This is at Fenway Park. So Fenway Park actually had some charging. And I went to many, many of these introductions, groundbreakings, everything else for new charging stations. It was and continues to be a lot of fun. Electric cars are not new. The electric cars were developed in 1830. And this is a picture of a vehicle called the Ne Jamais Content. I thought that this audience might get a kick out of this. This is a Belgian guy named Camille Jancy. And this vehicle broke the world land speed record of 100 kilometers per hour in 1899. And the turn of the century, there were 33% of the vehicles were gas, 33% were electric, and 33% were steam. And the New York taxi, many people don't know this, but was 100% electric at the turn of the century. But as I see it, and I think as the world sees it, and as President-elect Biden sees it, the future of mobility is surely electric. And clearly, no major industry will transform more over the next decade than transportation. And I'm not just talking passenger cars. I'm talking trucks, I'm talking taxis, I'm talking buses, I'm talking delivery vans. It is a revolution going on, and is surely exciting to be part of this revolution as I see this. In 2040, there should be 60 million electric vehicles, equivalent to 55% of the global light-duty vehicle market. Remember, I said right now, it's about 2% in the United States. So it's going to go rapidly to 55%. There's a lot of transformation that has to happen to make that happen. So the vehicle manufacturers have to build cars that not only are electric, they have to be reliable, they have to be at price parity with today's gas vehicles, and they also have to help an infrastructure to be able to charge these vehicles. Not only an infrastructure that will be there, but in times of power shortages and other things with backup capability and everything else. It's clearly a very exciting time in our business. Here's the graph of what the past has been. When President Obama got into office, he said that we will have 1 million EVs on the road by 2015. He was a tad optimistic. We passed that number in 2018, but it continues to accelerate. In fact, during COVID, the acceleration has happened even further in terms of the percentage of vehicles bought that are electric versus that are gas vehicles, and will continue to accelerate. This is a very exciting thing to be in. You can also look at the breakout between gas, which is the gray, and between ICE stands for internal combustion engine, and plug-in hybrids and battery electric vehicles, the BEVs in blue. And you can see the plug-in hybrids is only a niche getting us to these battery electric vehicles. You can see 55% of these vehicles in 2040 will have a plug, and over 45%, or I think 50% actually, will be battery electric, full battery electric. So what's happening to make this happen? So first, governments are enacting aggressive policies. This is not just the US governments and the state governments, but you probably very well know that many European countries are saying now that they are going to ban the sale of fossil fuel vehicles in 2030, 2035, 2040. And you see cities like Paris and London and Amsterdam setting their own kind of legislation. On top of that, you see massive funding from governments to put in the infrastructure and to allow people to buy the cars. Right now, we're still in a position where the vehicles are more expensive than their equivalent gas vehicles, and the governments and the utilities are stepping in to provide funding. As an example, in Massachusetts today, if you want to get a charging station for your workplace, and you are either an Eversource or a National Grid customer, they will pay 100% for your installation. Installation can represent half the cost of a charging station acquisition. The state of Massachusetts has funding to provide 60% of funding for the charging station. So for people who run businesses in Massachusetts or know people who run businesses in Massachusetts, this is an unbelievable opportunity to get charging infrastructure into your parking lots, as these vehicles are coming, and they are indeed coming. For the longest time, from the movie Field of Dreams, we used to say, if you build it, they will come. And surely they did. I could tell you a story about Google telling us that they were going to buy 50 charging stations, and that's all they were going to need for the better part of the next 3 years. And they came back to us 3 months later and said they needed another 50, and 3 months later and needed another 50. And today Google has over 2,500 charging stations in their parking lot in California. I often have been somewhat frustrated because the rest of the country is not quite as aggressive as California has been. But we've seen with companies like AstraZeneca and others that's happening all over the country as well. You've heard announcements from automakers as they're investing billions in the new EV models. The Volkswagen settlement was a huge thing. Volkswagen completely turned around the company and started investing major league in electric vehicles. Tesla has been the leader and still is the leader. If you look at the market share that Tesla, with all their models, the S, the 3, the Y, and the X, what they're doing and the success that they've had has all of their rivals jealous. And you can see in their market valuation that they are much larger than any of their closest competitors. In fact, I think they are GM, Ford combined is not as big as Tesla today. But this is important because as the automakers are investing, they are going to be bringing out vehicles and they're going to be promoting those vehicles, and people are going to find it easier to be able to get vehicles. When I started, the Nissan Leaf got 90 miles on a charge, and it was a very frustrating 90 miles because in the cold weather, as I learned myself with my Active E from BMW, it doesn't get 90 miles, it only got 60 miles. But now vehicles are standard coming out with 300, 350, 400 miles of range, which totally eliminates that range anxiety. That in conjunction with people putting a charging infrastructure out there has really helped us quite a bit. Consumers obviously and fleets are shifting to electric as well. A funny story, my kids all went to the French school in Boston, and at the time, the head of Bentley, who is now the CEO of Bentley North America, had his kids at the school as well. And I was starting in at Chargepoint. I had been there a couple of years. And I pulled him aside and I said, hey, what do you think? Is Bentley ever going to adopt electric vehicles? And he told me flat out, there is no way, no how Bentley will ever deploy electric vehicles. And just, I think this week they announced that they will be all electric in the year 2030. So when you have companies like Bentley and some of these other companies, they're realizing what's happening out there. So pretty exciting. Here's just some of the companies that have launched electric initiatives. It's sort of the same thing after everybody. Tesla led the way. So Tesla was dominant in passenger cars. They now have 2 models, the Cybertruck that I think many of you have seen, which is a very funky, looks like stainless steel vehicle, and the Tesla Semi, which is a Class 8 semi truck that will be carrying trailers across the country. So they are again leading the way in the fleet space as well. GM, and I'm not going to read these to you, but you can see every major automaker has invested and made announcements relative to vehicles. So from Chargepoint standpoint, what's happening is you're seeing 3 places. You're seeing shared transport, buses, taxis, and I'm not even going to talk about autonomous cars, but that's also a trend that's coming. You have people driving vehicles and delivering goods. All of those, we at Chargepoint are taking positions, are being quite successful. And we say we're creating the new fueling network. It's a different fueling network. It's not like going to the gas station when the yellow light goes on in your car. You can charge at home when you're sleeping at night. You can charge at work when you're there for 8 hours. Vehicles like fleets charge in their depots as they normally do, but they also have the opportunity to go out and charge in the wild. And we at Chargepoint, our job is to put together the infrastructure that will allow this to happen. The city of New York has over 2,000 electric vehicles. It's the largest electric fleet in the country from a municipal standpoint. But their cars sit at rest for 15 hours a day. And so we have a special charging approach for them that they don't have to charge these cars immediately when they get back. In fact, if they did that, they would pay very high demand charges and high costs. So part of the whole fueling network is to provide the flexibility to be able to decide when these cars get charged, how long they get charged for, and how much energy goes into these cars to do things like level out power usage, to reduce the amount of incoming power to a building that you might need, and to avoid costly demand charges. There are major markets out there that are committed to this electrification, so it doesn't happen by itself. It's not just Tesla. So when Tesla went out there, they showed the world what they can do. They've got other companies, whether it's bus companies or truck companies or passenger vehicle companies doing it. But the energy companies are heavily involved in this right now and have become even more heavily involved. In fact, in the case of Shell and BP, they've actually bought charging station companies to get more familiar with this and are selling those in the US and in Europe. So there are competitors right now. Imagine we, 750 people, competing with the likes of BP and Shell in the United States. Total is actually a partner of ours in Europe, and we're working with EDF very quickly also. But these companies, they have to make sure there's enough power available. They have to make sure that you can get that power to the locations. If you're trying to charge Class 8 semi trucks, you need a lot of power to do that. And if you basically have a depot, you're trying to charge 100 of them, you need enormous amounts of power. The oil and gas companies are also involved because they see a threat to their business. So whether it's buying low carbon credits in California, or whether it's investing in charging state companies like Chevron did with us, people are getting involved quite heavily. But then there's all the other players around, the technology providers that provide technology in addition to charging to make these fleets go and operate properly. Just a couple of pictures. The one thing common in all these pictures is that they all have charging stations from Chargepoint. These are some fleet things, and people say the fleet is late these days and the fleet is not coming and there's not enough vehicles. But this is the city of New York with a refuse truck, an electric refuse truck. They also have an electric street sweeper, shuttle vans. On the right, it's Class 8 vehicles. You can see the Frito-Lay vehicle in California delivering potato chips. This is what's in the middle is called a yard tractor. This is taking things from whether it's a port to distribution facilities or taking things from distribution facilities to vehicles. Very important market. And of course, the bus market is something important. Municipal fleets, and it's not just California. I've got the city of Columbus with over 150 electric vehicles. City of Boston, utilities, and this one is Con Ed in New York. And of course, you're seeing advertisements now of Amazon, who bought 100,000 electric vehicles from a company called Rivian that's making electric pickup trucks. By the way, they just announced if you want to start reserving your electric pickup trucks, they're going for, I think, between $70,000 and $75,000. And it's an exciting day for that company, which is trying to be the next Tesla, but in the pickup space. Quickly, the benefits of an EV in this environment. It's not all about the environment. It's important, but when you look at fleets, it's also the ability to lower your costs. The fuel cost is somewhat, I think it's 33% of the cost of gas, and the maintenance costs have been proven, as we've seen from many fleets announcing what their costs are, can be 20% to 25% of what the regular vehicles are. So they can really make a case of this. The other thing is that fleet charging is very predictable. So you know how many vehicles you are, you know how many vehicles are going to be in the depot. And so we're finding third-party finance companies very interested in helping financing these depots, because they know that they can sell based on a per mile or per vehicle basis, and they will get their money back. Unlike the people who are looking at putting EV charging stations at corridors or at gas stations across the highways, you just don't know how many people are going to go and charge there. You have no guess, and the numbers have been ramping, but they've not been ramping as much as we would have hoped. But in terms of a fleet, it's very predictable. So we're finding a lot of third-party companies who are interested in providing financing for this. If anybody's interested in that, they can catch me afterwards. So as a summary, and I'll pause for 5 minutes of questions. EVs are here to stay. They started in the 1800s. They went away because the inertia between the gas vehicles, I can tell you the story on that, but the costs are coming down rapidly. The availability of different types of vehicles at different cost points is going up. Electricity is plentiful and available almost everywhere. There's a big push towards natural gas vehicles and hydrogen powered vehicles, but the problem is that the supplies of that are not as plentiful as electricity. You're going to need a lot of it. The utilities are ready for it, but it's coming. The financial and environmental benefits are compelling, especially for fleets as we go forward. You can tell I'm a little partial of my fleet responsibility right now. Governments, utilities, and other organizations are going to be creating the funding, the mandates to facilitate the transition. I didn't mention, but California is going to outlaw gas vehicles in 2035. They've also made some bold statements about how many vehicles will be fleet vehicles, how many of those will be electric. And then there's a consortium of about 13 or 14 states in the East who are mimicking that, and you'll see more and more with that. You've heard Joe Biden talk about not only helping the states by putting in 500,000 additional charging stations across the United States, but he's very committed to electrifying the fleet of the government of the United States. Alone, the U.S. Postal Service has 200,000 vehicles that they're in process of doing an evaluation of what their next generation vehicle is. And they haven't announced it yet, but my guess is it will likely be either all electric or a very large part being electric. The major industry forces are collaborating here. Current US EV penetration, I think it's 1.5%. I think I said 2 earlier. What can it be in 2025? What can it be in 2040? And what can all our organizations do together to figure out how to make sure that that happens? And with that, I'll say thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. And I'll open any questions that may be there.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Scott. So Scott Miller is VP of Sales North America from Chargepoint. Thank you for this great presentation. We have a few questions in the Q&A. So the one question is about hydrogen. Does it have a better future than electricity for vehicle? What's your point of view on hydrogen?
So hydrogen is used to power fuel cells, and fuel cells, can go a whole lot longer than just regular batteries can. So where I see the hydrogen contribution is in the long distance fleets. So they're going to want to go very long distances, and I think there's a possibility there. There's a company that many of you may know that's called Nikola, that is a takeoff on Tesla, because it was Nikola Tesla who did a lot of stuff. They have announced a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, and it'll be very interesting to see how that actually works out. Hydrogen up until now is not plentiful. It costs very much to put in a hydrogen plant, so to speak, so that you can actually fill these vehicles up. But I think there will be a place for hydrogen.
Excellent, excellent. And please feel free, the audience, to ask questions. This event is also for you to help you understand, these topics. So please contribute. Don't hesitate. Don't be shy. Ask a question. All questions are great. Make yourself known. The second question is there a risk that the batteries in the electric cars explode of burning and any safety issues that we need to think of with this transition?
Yeah, there's always been a concern about that. It hasn't been well founded. In fact, there are probably 10 times as many gas car fires on the sides of the highway than there are electric fires that there are. But it is an issue. The companies, have protected the batteries from that, but I'm not saying it won't happen. It can happen, but it happens unbelievably a lot less than what happens with gas cars.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So next question is, what about the recycling of electric batteries? Aren't we creating a new problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of people ask that question when you look at the sustainability of these vehicles over time. There are people working on the recycling of these batteries to make new auto batteries. but also the utilities are quite interested in getting these batteries for storage at their facility, so they can also be repurposed for storage. An electric battery kind of is no good after it gets down to about, electric car battery, about 75% of its original range. One interesting thing is that as these cars are getting older, we're finding that they don't degrade as quickly as people think they were going to degrade. So people were worried about buying a car and having the battery, kind of die on them, which is not happening. But the recycling, there's a lot of efforts in that in a lot of different places. Utilities, repurposing for other uses, and also recycling to be able to put in for vehicles again.
Excellent. And then maybe one question, every transition has winners and losers. So, what's the future, in your opinion, for traditional legacy energy companies? Are they really making the shift? Is it them driving actually some of the transition too?
They're trying. Whether they'll be successful or not, don't know. It's just like the auto companies. They're trying. They went slowly. They went kicking and screaming. But the truth will tell, they've been shocked by the success of Tesla and what Tesla has done. And now there's a bunch of other Teslas coming out that are going to try and do that. And the question is, will the traditional ones, GM, Ford, and the other ones, be able to withstand that? They've all announced electric vehicles. Ford has the F-150 coming out. GM, the electric F-150. GM just announced the e-Hummer coming out, which it's put a lot of excitement. But at the bottom line is they have to deliver, and those cars have to be as reliable as what we found with Tesla and some of the other electric cars. By the way, the electric cars, the reason why the maintenance costs are so much less is they're just really simple. All you have is an electric motor. You don't have oil. You don't have a distributor cap. You don't have spark plugs. You don't have any of the stuff that you have to deal with in a internal combustion engine. So they should be reliable, but the question is, will the big auto companies be able to come out and do something? And will it be Tesla buying GM or GM buying Tesla?
Excellent. And what's your view on two-wheel mobility, scooters, ATVs, and so on, versus, four-wheel?
Yeah, so Harley Davidson is a proud customer of ours, and they've got their electric motorcycle. I think there will absolutely be a place for those. My memories of Paris is going around the périphérique and having all these little scooters scoot around, and they made a lot of noise. And it would be great to see them not making that much noise and scooting around there a little less. I personally don't ride a motorcycle, but I think the future is great for those. As is for, interestingly enough, e-bikes. There's a big market for that. The batteries aren't as big. You plug it into your regular plugs, but yes, I'm very optimistic on it. You're going to see a completely changed transportation system, in the next 10 to 20 years. And it's going to be so exciting to be part of it, to watch it evolve and see what actually happens.
It's clearly a revolution that is very exciting. So one question from Mo here: how do you generate enough electricity? More EV, more electric need. So how is that going to strain the grid, and what are you guys thinking about this?
You just need a nuclear power plant at every house. That's all. It's easy. No, I'm kidding. The utility companies are all gearing up. Not only are they providing funding, they're also electrifying their own fleets, but they are gearing up to be able to supply this. They compare this to the advent of air conditioning, where nobody had air conditioning and now virtually everybody has air conditioning, and they believe they can handle it. Obviously, there's concerns in places like California, where they have rolling blackouts and things like that. Will they be able to supply it? But they're all over this, and I have confidence that they'll be able to do that. You'll see the traditional supplies augmented by wind. Wind is great because wind comes at night, and so the problem with solar, it doesn't come at night, but solar's out there also. I will mention that in the Nordic countries, these are the leaders in electric vehicles. Norway, I think 70% of the vehicles purchased in the last 6 months were electric. This is not 2, it's not 10, it's 70. In Denmark, they're putting up windmills so that they can supply existing electricity, and they find it they're doing it at night, which is the time when they need it. There's also going to be need for battery storage to store a lot of this. So with all the solar going up, most vehicles are charging at night, so you actually have to store that solar and then be able to charge from the solar as opposed to charging. But I'm convinced that utilities will be ready.
Okay, great. Well, Scott, this is really great. One last question and we'll move to the next speaker. So the last question was from Christopher Philip. Thanks for asking the question. Are the movements towards creating new clean electricity sources for e-cars progressing in partnerships such as Tidal Ocean, Current Energy for your charging station in Massachusetts, for example?
Can you say that again? You cut out. I missed that.
Are there movements towards creating new clean electricity sources for e-cars progressing through partnerships such as with Tidal Ocean? Philip,
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes and no. I don't think there's a big input on that for the vehicles themselves. It's not focused on that. I think it's focused on overall energy supply, which is the whole equation. So including the homes, including the air conditioning, everything else. I don't know if there's anything out there that's saying we're going to create new sources for this, although there are solar canopies going up, and this is really interesting. There's a synagogue in close to my town that's putting up this very large solar canopy. They're paying nothing for it because a local company or a finance company is going to take that energy and sell that back to the grid. And under those, they're going to put charging stations because they just felt it was the right thing to do. So you're seeing a lot of those public-private partnerships that will allow, additional supply of clean energy like that.
Excellent. Scott, thank you so much for this presentation. This was really on point. Anyone has any needs or want to contact with Scott Miller, feel free to chat with, send this request in the chat to Mickey or myself, and we'll make sure we make the introduction. Thank you, Scott. This was great. And we wish you a good meeting, good management meeting over the
Thank you, Alistair. One thing, the best place to reach me is probably LinkedIn. I publish a lot of stuff on the electric vehicle business and that. So find me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to link up with you.
Excellent. And thank you for French American Chamber of Commerce for connecting us also. So thank you, Scott. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Je vous en prie.
Thank you.